got a full committee, so we will begin. Yeah, it's hard. Thanks, everybody, for recovering from last night's midnight council meeting.
Who said we recovered?
Yes, you're here, that's all that matters.
Okay, that's
You don't actually have to be thinking or talking, just here. So welcome, everyone, to the joint meeting for Rules and Open Government Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, March 11th. We have everyone present, so there's a quorum. We'll start with a review of the agenda for March 17th, and I'll ask for any changes. Note for the maker of the motion that there is an add for an absence for Councilmember Jimenez on the additional sheet, and then we'll start with pages 4 and 5. Are there any changes?
Mayor, just a note that we're working, and we'll be working with the manager's office to find a room for a closed session. I think the existing conference room doesn't really meet our social distancing requirements, and the other thing is when staff comes in and they're all sitting out in the green room, so I think we're trying to find there's other places, whether we do it in here or the dais or however we do it.
Yeah, this would seem to be big enough.
We'll figure it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Just to give you a heads up that we'll be noticing it.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Okay, pages 6 and 7. Pages 8 and 9. Pages 10 and 11. Pages 12 and 13. Note that the advocacy trip to Washington, D.C. will be canceled. Pages 14 and 15. Pages 16 and 17. Okay, so certainly we'll have a full agenda.
Yes.
Just thinking out loud, given the budget message and then the additional actions. I don't actually see them. Weren't there actions that we wanted to take related to the emergency declaration? Did I miss that? A discussion, for example, around assisting small businesses or?
Yeah, so there's
That's
an
on
ad
the ad
sheet.
sheet?
There's an ad sheet.
That's also on the ad sheet?
Yeah, it's number 8.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I see. There's
So-
hidden there.
So we're
Okay.
coming back with the urgency ordinances.
Got it.
And then number 3 is discussion and direction on, with respect to small businesses,
Oh, I got it. Okay.
and then any funding mechanism, which,
All we have in our ad sheet is just a title. Is that sufficient for notice? It says actions related to.
one then. Yours has a
Oh, I got an old one. Oh, okay,
I got
good.
an old one as well.
Oh, great. Thanks, Rick. Cool, there it is. All right, so for the record, it says action related to moratorium on evictions and income loss due to COVID-19. And there appear to be 3 items. One is approving an ordinance that establishes a moratorium for non-payment of rent evictions for tenants with incomes affected by novel coronavirus. The second is adopt an urgency ordinance that establishes a moratorium for non-payment of rent for tenants with incomes affected by COVID-19. And third, discuss and direct the city attorney to return with an ordinance, urgency ordinance establishes moratorium for non-payment of rent for small business tenants with incomes affected by COVID-19. And then number 4, I'm sorry, is discuss creating a funding pool and/or budget changes for San Jose residential tenants and small businesses. Okay. Okay, so I think that covers the topics we discussed yesterday. Any additions?
No, but a quick question. I know there was some uncertainty whether you'll actually have that
We,
ordinance
yeah,
back?
we
Is it
we
so-
fully expect to have it unless barring something
Okay.
between now and Friday.
You're saying that with confidence, so I.
Barring a
I
pandemic,
believe-
yes.
Well, that was very confident. All right.
Yeah, definitely too soon.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, I'd like to make a motion to accept the agenda for Tuesday, March 17th with a sunshine waiver for an ad sheet with an excused absence and the addition of the moratorium on evictions and income loss due to COVID-19.
Second.
okay,
Any cards?
no cards on this item. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're going on to March 24th. Pages 4 and 5. Pages 6 and 7. Pages 8 and 9. And pages 10 and 11.
All right. All the land use stuff is at 1:30.
There you go.
So it is, yes. I just had a question, Dave, I don't expect you to, not off the top of your head, but I thought I'd ask just in case, that, the airport master plan amendment, is that, I assume that's critical path for any potential construction that might begin at the airport, is that right?
It is, yes, and this, I believe, is the environmental piece of that.
Okay. But the final decision wouldn't be for several
No.
months about a go, no-go?
That's right, that's absolutely
Yeah,
correct.
this gives you CEQA clearance and then the authorization to move towards increasing the number of gates.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to have a few months to understand what the impacts of this thing are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this industry may shrink and, okay. Thank you. All right, any additions? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda for Tuesday, March 24th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. On to item D, which is a release for study session dates.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. On the public record,
Motion to note and file.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have a number of consent items under G.
Motion to approve consent items.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Joe's here.
All right, Joe.
Good afternoon, Joe Royce, City Auditor. I'm here with my monthly report of activities for February. So we have a number of projects underway. The next thing coming to you all will be the semi-annual audit recommendation status report, which is on the March 24th council agenda. With that, I ask that you approve the monthly report as well as add a few items onto various council committee work plans, specifically the audit of fire safety code compliance to the Community and Economic Development Committee's April 27th agenda, the audit of fleet maintenance to the Transportation and Environment Committee's May 4th agenda, the audit of park maintenance to the Neighborhood Services and Education Committee's May 14th agenda, and the audit of development fee work in progress reserves to the Community and Economic Development Committee's May 18th agenda. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Okay.
So on the police staffing audit, are we looking at like span of control or just number of people?
Right now, we're just in the information gathering phase. We're just kind of finalizing what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at a lot of different things, whether it's just the number over time and just looking at what the staffing has looked like for the last whatever number of years. We're going to go back as far as we can. We're going to be looking at kind of the composition. We're going to be looking at a lot of different things. The specific objectives we haven't really nailed down yet. We're still working with the police department on figuring that out.
Okay. On the item number 20, the timelines of code enforcement responses, is that, not, you haven't started it yet, but do you have an idea of how many funded code positions there are? And how many are empty and how many are needed?
We haven't really gotten into that yet. I mean, I can look offline and get back to you about, what the vacancy rates are in that area. I don't know right now.
That would be great, yeah. I think this one is kind of important for the budget discussions that are coming up. It would be nice to know.
Yeah, I can pass that on to Rosalind as well.
Yeah.
One of us can try to get back to you, at least to look at if there's any vacancy issues.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the report.
Second.
I had a follow-up question, Councilmember Campos, on the police staffing. I know there's an audit from a few years back around civilianization.
Yeah.
I know some of that has happened, some of it hasn't, maybe for very good reasons. But it'd be helpful for us to understand, as we're rebuilding this department, part of the challenge is we know expectations rise faster than our ability to staff. And there are lots of units we all want to restore quickly, whether it's, traffic enforcement or sexual assaults or a whole host of things. And so essentially, I'm just looking for more ways to be able to get officers into all those units. And so it would really be helpful to have an additional sort of an update on what's happened to civilianization. Are there any more opportunities for it? If not, that's fine. Just sort of a clear eye to that. Is that something that you could incorporate?
So I'll pass that on. I think the one component that's fairly new within the last number of years is the growth of the CSOs, and so
Yeah.
that's another opportunity. So that's something we could be looking at. One thing we often do is go back and look at old audits and see what has occurred, if there's other opportunities, if there's further opportunities, and so we can work some of that analysis into that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you make a very good point about CSOs. Maybe that allows us to make some shifting happen. Anyway, thank you. Okay, any other questions on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, we're on to the Bay Area News Group's Public Record Acts request, which is item 3. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Chiefs and Lieutenant. Good to have you all here. So I know we could not take action last week. So I think the question I had posed, I don't think it was made into a formal motion, was really, why wouldn't we just direct everybody to sit down with Bay Area News Group, come to some agreement about how we can release these records in a way that'll get the most relevant information out quickly. And perhaps through that process, allow some iteration that will enable us to determine whether we really need to dig deeper on some records or not, and perhaps provide some priority. That is, if you're releasing a top police report first and so forth, and all that might be able to be negotiated through some kind of agreement. So that was a question I think that I had posed, and I'd be interested in the thoughts of department, city attorney, and anyone else who wants to weigh in.
The concept of an agreement, I'm not adverse to. I mean, anything you can get, what it gets down to is you need to have realistic timelines, and it's something we need. If we're saying the city needs to perform, we want to make sure the department has timelines that they're going to be able to meet, and then what possible remedies. Obviously, I want to know what we have in mind. It's obviously something we have to negotiate, but sitting down, walking through this, we've had meetings in the past, is not something I'm adverse to. Ultimately, I'd bring it to the council, at least with the potential to get their feedback if there's any concerns on their part. But the only concern I'd have is to make sure any timelines we agree to are things that we know we can meet, and that's part of the negotiation.
Right.
And I guess I'd just add, so the approach that we'd been taking was to complete an entire case and release it. I think if there's an opportunity to refine and hone and focus what we release to meet the needs of the requester. And especially if that translates to less work for us. I think we're all in on that. I think we're already making that shift and pivot, but I think that would be helpful to us because, I think what we're saying is we're not trying to be dismissive of the request. We're eager to respond to it, but it's just a tremendous amount of work. And so I think we're prepared to make that adjustment, and if it needs to be through a discussion, or I think we're open to that.
Okay. Lieutenant, did you want to?
I don't know if you'd like me to answer the questions that are kind of posed here, or if I should start with my prepared comments. It's up to you.
Well, maybe if you could start with a response to that basic question, which is, can we come to some agreement here that
Well,
can
this
help
one-
us move faster? I think that would be helpful.
If I may,
Yeah.
the only issue I have with entering into any type of agreement is what the realistic expectation is. We've already said that the issues we have, we're narrowing down and whittling away the best practice internally, how we're going to take on this project. When you talk about prior PRA requests and 1421 issues, we're talking apples and oranges. We had, and Lieutenant Cook can get into the specifics, but we had two people working on department PRA requests before. Now we're working on 20 years of what's required in 1421, which is a huge amount of data and information that needs to be put out. And we're talking about, the reality of how we deal with that. What's the best way? We're putting out RFIs and plan to put out RFPs on potential software solutions and/or being able to contract out with somebody to help us out with these issues. And we need staffing. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. We need people to do the work. And, I understand you're going to entertain the agreement aspect of it with Bang, but the expectations have to be there. The work still needs to be done.
Well, let me describe the alternative. I know that Bert didn't come in here with his attorneys, but I have talked to their attorneys, and they're going to sue. So, and if they sue, it's not going to be us telling you to do it. It's going to be a judge telling you to do it. And so it seems to me we'd probably want it under our terms in a way that makes sense to minimize the amount of work we do and really focus on maybe, for example, providing top reports first and those kinds of things. Or we can just wait for the judge to order us, but I guarantee you between now and then, it's going to be, I think, a string of embarrassing defeats for us in the media, which is why we're not producing records. And I think the very least we ought to do is see how we can accelerate what we're doing.
And, I get that, Mr. Mayor, and I want to remind you that the department has met with Mr. Robinson and his group regarding this. We've explained where we are and where we're going and how we're going to get there. And that's exactly what would happen if the city was sued over this and a judge was to implement. We would be in the exact same spot.
So I know he's not here now, at least it appears he's not here now, but, the way he described it when he was here last week was, yeah, we met, they agreed to a certain rate at which some reports would be produced. They're not even meeting that, even at a goal of 2 years of production. And so you can understand that meeting didn't work, at least from their standpoint. I mean, how many reports can we say we've turned over at this point?
So that kind of leads into what Lieutenant Cook has provided, and there's some background information for you and where we are and where we're headed, and he can probably explain that
Okay.
for you.
But if I could just add, so I think I understand where he was coming from when he talked to us, and he was measuring our success since that conversation. I still think we're ramping up on this, and that doesn't necessarily, just because we haven't, met that turnout rate so far, doesn't mean we can't meet it in the remaining time of 2 years, especially if we're able to staff up, and especially if we're able to make some adjustments to kind of what we're releasing and when we're releasing it. So I, with all due respect to what he said, I understand he's skeptical of the progress that we've made since that conversation, but that doesn't mean we won't be successful in kind of meeting that objective of the 2-year pivot that Eddie committed to.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of concern about whether that 2 years was sufficient. as well. I mean, given that other cities are doing it much faster than we are.
Fair enough, but I
Yeah.
guess the example that was provided to us was the city of San Diego, where the agreement was reached for 2 years, and so that's what was modeled. That may still not hit the mark for some, but I think there was a sincere effort to try to make an adjustment to meet that.
Right, okay. So I'm sorry, Lieutenant, I know you've been trying to say something, so
That's quite all
we'll
right.
listen.
Particularly with respect to the 3 per month, the way he characterized that when he was in front of this committee was that we promised to do 3 per month. And what we promised to do was the workload within 2 years. And at the end of that promise, we explained that that's essentially 3 per month on average, so that if we were to discover additional cases, which we do, as we're combing through our files, we occasionally find additional cases, that for every 3 additional cases we require, we would need an additional month.
Right.
And so that was where the 3 per month came from. It wasn't a promise to do 3 every month.
Right,
because
understood.
very obviously, as we ramp up, we're going to be doing fewer during the ramp up and a lot more at the end in order to meet that objective that we promised. But I do have some prepared comments that address some of the things that were brought before the committee
Okay.
last week. So, I am Lieutenant Paul Cook of the San Jose Police Department's Research and Development Unit. With me today is our Assistant Chief of Police, Knopf, and our Deputy Chief of Police, Mata. One of my jobs at the Research and Development Unit is to address public records requests. And I'm here this afternoon to speak to the question of why San Jose Police Department release of records appears to be behind the pace of other similar organizations. Much ado was made here last week about San Jose Police Department's performance being dismal in comparison to the San Diego Sheriff's Department. Since then, I've had time to review what that agency has accomplished, and I would like to explain why I believe it is a useful comparison. The San Diego Sheriff's Department has released records from 80 use of force and disciplinary matters, while San Jose has released records from only 13. In making this comparison, we should consider the difference between the number of events versus the number of pages that an agency has released records for. It is also telling to consider the effect of staffing on work output. The San Diego Sheriff's Department has more than twice the number of officers as San Jose does, but more importantly to this conversation, it has just over 3 times as many non-sworn personnel, with 1,723 compared to San Jose's 500. Public records processing is typically a non-sworn function, and in San Jose, our chief is committed to doing our public records work with non-sworn personnel rather than removing sworn officers from their already assigned policing functions. So with 3 times the number of non-sworn personnel in its employ, has the San Diego Sheriff's Department processed and released 3 times as many records as compared to San Jose. If you measure it by the number of events for which records have been released, they have accomplished about 6 times as much as we have. But I believe that counting the number of cases for which records have been released is far less informative than counting the number of pages that have been released. This metric accounts for the wide variance in the volume of pages per event. As an example today, I have brought our largest officer-involved shooting case, our smallest disciplinary record, and a typical force case involving great bodily injury. Because this disciplinary incident is more than 6 years old, which is beyond our IA retention time, it's the only remaining record the department possesses is this 2-page letter of discipline from the officer's permanent personnel folder. In contrast, the first case we released was for an officer-involved shooting. It is 2,536 pages of written and photographic material. The GBI case that I have on the table is typical for such a case at 48 pages of written and photographs. To date, San Jose Police Department has released about 4,500 pages of written and photographic material, compared to the San Diego Sheriff's Department, which has released approximately 13,500 pages of similar type material. This amounts to 3 times more production than the San Jose Police Department, which is consistent with their agency having over 3 times the non-sworn staffing of our police department. But despite these comparisons, the San Jose Police Department would like our production times to be faster, which really leads to today's primary question: why has the San Jose Police Department not released our records more quickly? The informational memo published earlier this month described the nature of this work and gave a history of the foundational labor that went into identifying the work and creating the workflow. But those tasks are done. There is no foundational work left to do. Now it is simply a matter of having our non-sworn personnel work through and release the material. So now it's really just about having enough people to do the work. Prior to the passage of SB 1421, Our department managed its public records workload with a team of 2 analysts who also performed a number of other functions. In response to SB 1421, the council allotted monies to hire 5 additional personnel. These were not budgeted until July, and 3 of the positions were time-limited with funding set to expire this summer. So we did not even start recruiting until mid-year. 3 of the positions were classified as senior police data specialists, which we soon discovered was an ill-suited classification for this kind of work and for which there was a very small pool of qualified candidates. After 2 recruitments, we were only able to hire 1 senior police data specialist. So we reclassified the 2 remaining positions to analyst and began recruiting again. The job offers were accepted for both positions, with 1 person having started this week, and while the second remains in the background process. Late in 2019, 2 overstrength analyst positions were added to the work group, requiring an additional recruitment. 2 candidates are currently in backgrounds for those positions. It is important to note that these positions have been very hard to fill due to the undesirability of a time-limited job offer in a low unemployment economy, and due to the necessity that candidates pass their background checks. Our new hire is still being trained, and 3 positions remain unfilled. In 2019, the 1 sworn officer assigned to my unit was sometimes assisting with SB 1421 workload, but I have since had to reassign him to perform public records work related to SB 978 instead. Hiring has been a challenge, but once these positions are filled, we should be able to more than double our production capacity. The reality is that in order to attract qualified personnel to this work group, the job security needs to be stronger. In other words, these positions need to be funded permanently or at a minimum in longer increments than 1 year. There will be those who will suggest that we simply reassign our sworn or non-sworn personnel from other parts of the department in order to prioritize this work. But our non-sworn staffing is already very low department-wide. There is not a place where removing personnel will not compromise some other function of the department. So how fast this work gets done will be a function of how many people we're willing to hire for the task. What we have now is clearly not sufficient. I would like to close by discussing budget proposals. Last year's budget request was based on our best estimate of what we thought we needed for a workflow that we were unfamiliar with. In contrast, this year's budget request is based on our experience. Because public records laws continue to expand, our budget proposal includes a larger number of personnel and requests that those positions be given permanent, ongoing funding to enhance our capacity to hire and retain personnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Okay, I know that Bert Robinson joined us, I think, well into the discussion, so you missed a little bit there. Bert, you can review it on video. I don't know if you want to be heard at this time, or?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah.
I'm sure I missed a
If you could pull that up, just to make sure you can,
All right.
yeah, ask Henry to help out.
I'm
There
sure
you
I
go.
missed good stuff there, and apologies for that. The White House released a new set of guidelines for how Santa Clara County should be responding to coronavirus, which are, I'm sure.
Maybe they could give
will
us
be
some
very
test
helpful
kits.
for the county. So anyway, obviously the police department has its perspective on why we are where we are, and I think it's clear from the note that I sent to many of you, and I think was part of your agenda packet. I have perhaps a somewhat different perspective, but we don't need to talk about what happened in the past. We need to talk about what's going to happen going forward, because that's what's most important. I'm encouraged to hear that the police department thinks it's going to do better. What I'm looking for from the committee is some sort of a commitment for how much better the police department is going to do, and some sort of recourse, short of me suing the city, that would give us some assurances that the police department can really live up to the commitment that it makes. The commitments that I've gotten from the police department so far, they are required under the law to give us a schedule for the release of records, have not impressed me. 2 years to fulfill a Public Records Act request is better than 4 years, but still not really responsive to what I would consider to be timely performance under the law. So I made a suggestion to the Rules Committee as to how I think we might accomplish something that could give Bang and the public the assurances that these records will be released in a timely way, and I'm requesting that you adopt that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll disclose my own experience in redacting reports. I spent 8 years of my career on various days sitting next to a photocopy machine with a black crayon in my hand, redacting police and federal agent reports that I would then have to turn over to defense counsel. So I know a little bit about the grunt work, only a little bit about the grunt work that's involved, because I did it. And what I do not understand, I mean, I was informed 3 weeks ago that we were going to have this shift. The shift was going to be, we'll get out the top reports, so then the Bay Area News Group can at least look at the breadth of the cases, and they would have the 10 or 15 or 20-page face report, right, the top report. And that way, at the very least, A, we can say accurately, we've got the basic information out there, and obviously we've got to do a lot more if we're going to get an officer-involved shooting of that engagement out the door. We know that means probably video and probably needs audio and a lot of other things. But at least they can also give us feedback about what would be a priority. And I guess the question is, in that 3 weeks, have we actually provided any of those top reports? Are we doing that now?
We've provided 2 in the last week and a half.
Okay. All right. And Bert, have you had a chance to see those?
I've seen one of the 2.
Okay.
One of them came.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've seen one of the 2. One of them came, I think, last night or the night before last.
Okay.
And I have not had a chance to review that one because of this other news story that's been consuming my time.
Understood. We are also similarly distracted. So in terms of just as an approach, Bert, is that acceptable by virtue of us getting you top reports so that then you can tell our department, this is something we're interested in, or this is not something we're interested in?
I think, and I tried to say this in a letter, I think some version of something like that on a designated time frame
Right.
would be way better than where we are right now.
Okay.
I just appreciate the opportunity to try to work out a time frame that makes sense
Okay. So.
with the city manager's office and the city attorney's office.
Right, so I'd be prepared to support a motion that would direct the city manager and city attorney to sit down with Bay Area News Group to come up with a schedule to be able to produce in the manner that we've discussed, in the hope that may both accelerate the production of the key information as well as hopefully save us some time as well.
Mayor, just so I understand, and so are we talking about the equivalent of like an executive summary for each incident or case? Or?
Yeah, typically there's a case report, maybe, Lieutenant, you want to describe how it often works?
So, for example, this report here that we have in front of us is about 13 photographs, and it also includes a complaint filing, and it concludes a copy of the blood sample that was taken. And then you get down to about 40, I think this is 48 pages. So you get down to about 35 pages of this that is essentially the bulk crime report. You know, the Senate bill has required us to release a lot more than just this.
Agreed.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
and
agreed.
so for a typical great bodily injury case, this is what I think we are talking about, is this part of essentially what most people would call the crime report.
Right.
And, you know, when you look at officer-involved shooting, the crime report itself even accounts for probably a quarter of this. So the crime report itself is reasonably large when you get into something like an officer-involved shooting. And one of the things to bear in mind is that, well, actually not in the first 5 years, but when we go back beyond 5 years, most of the things we have are officer-involved shootings. So this is certainly less work than what the law requires us to release. And I think maybe one of the caveats to understand is that even if we give this to the Bay Area News Group and they tell us that this is not a particular case where we want the rest of it, that there are 29 other requesters who've requested these things. And so if any one person in that retroactive request group says, no, I want it all, the department eventually will have to get to it all. So doing this first is certainly a way, I hope, to come to some amicable solution here today, but it doesn't ultimately relieve us of having probably to do the entire workload, ultimately.
No, that's
Okay.
understood, but it sounds like, at least for this particular request, that having that case report would suffice for the time being, and then if they need additional information, or if they make the request for additional information, then you can continue that process for that
And that's
particular
absolutely
case.
that's absolutely where we are going. That's where my staff is doing today. And so, and we're not gonna be doing the photographs, immediately, we're gonna be doing the crime report per se. And so that is, a shift we have made, but it just takes a while once you start doing it differently for the work product to come out the other end of the pipe.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just one from Bert, just in terms of just your throughput, how many cases can you handle or manage at any particular time? If they gave you 10 cases right now, what would be your throughput in terms of being able to manage that? And the reason why I'm asking that question is,
In the middle of the coronavirus or,
well, no,
or not?
or not. And the reason why I'm asking that question is if, you know, if I had a magic wand and we were able to get all of the reports that you requested done right now and delivered to you, I would imagine that the vast majority of them would just be collecting dust because you only have so much capacity to get through and review those reports.
So what I would say is, we probably don't need to read 1,200 pages of a report to know whether it's a newsworthy story or not.
Right.
And, you know, and one of the, Sam and I talked about the question of sort of, you know, would we be able to prioritize cases without having seen them? And what I said to him in that conversation was, you know, our problem is that we don't know what we don't know. When it's a GBI in particular, it's something that we've never written about before. Sorry, great bodily injury. I shouldn't be using that kind of jargon. Whereas the officer-involved shootings are almost all things that we've written about before. We know those cases. We know which ones raised questions in the community and which ones didn't. The great bodily injury, I don't know. I need something to see to make a judgment. So something like a 13-page or whatever it was you said that would be typical of a GBI, we can make an assessment of that as to whether it's newsworthy. So if someone, just to be more responsive to your question, if someone gave us these top reports for 20 cases, I'm sure we could be through them in a week and know which ones we would want more on. I have a reporter who does nothing but 1421 right now and has been doing that for about a year. And it takes a lot less time to read a case than it does to produce it. While the police department, I may disagree on how long it takes to produce a case, I would concede that it takes less time to read it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Any other questions? Okay, Councilman Cox.
Kind of. I wanted to ask, since you were talking about the bodily injury cases, are there cases that you prefer us working on before others? Is that something you're willing to narrow down what your top processes are? Is it police discipline or is it?
I believe, and Lieutenant Cook can correct me if I'm wrong, that there aren't many police discipline cases, and I think we have some material on all those cases, although as you pointed to, there's not a lot of material on those cases. It's disciplinary letters that ranging from like 1 page to 9 pages or something by my count. I think once we get into conversation about these cases, we can probably do a better job of prioritizing. I mean, I said to Lieutenant Cook on that case, which I'm sure, however long that took, and we might disagree on how long it should have taken, I'm sure that took a fair amount of time. That was not an interesting case for us. The DA had been involved in that case. There had been a fairly significant public report made on that case. So it didn't produce a lot of news, which I would have told the department.
Right, so I think we agree on the approach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just was just thinking about even making this more efficient. Would be nice to know what you don't need information on so that we can refine it even further. But I'm willing to go
Yeah.
down the path that you are, Mayor.
Okay, I think they'll know better once they have a chance to look at the top report.
And if I could just real quick remind you that Mr. Robinson's group's not the only one that's asked for these cases. So it's, working with him and his group on which are most important for him is one thing, but we'd also have other requests of the same information from other people. So it becomes
Understood.
problematic.
But I can't help but think that they're going to think about it similarly the same way that Mr. Robinson does, which is tell us what's there first, and then we'll decide just what the priority ought to be.
You'd be surprised.
Okay, understood. Mr. Soto?
Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. We afford the officers as a society a lot of latitude. They have the ability to arrest, to point a gun at a citizen, to arrest them, to put them in jail, to charge them. And we as a citizenry have the right to cross-examine all witnesses against us. And so this is about the ability of a defendant to challenge the credibility of an officer when he goes up onto the stand. And we're not equipped with all of the information that is necessary in order for a just sentence to be imposed. And so we're depriving of the citizens of the ability to cross-examine, so that leads to Fifth Amendment issues of due process and 14th Amendment issues of equal protection under the law. This is a law. This isn't, I don't get as a citizen the ability to determine what laws I want to follow and what laws I want to break. And then when I'm called out on it, I don't get the ability to stand there and explain to you while the gun's pointed at my head, to tell you and explain to you why I'm not going to follow the law, or why you got to kind of hold on and come arrest me later. You know, because that's what we're talking about, equal protection under the law. It is a 14th Amendment right, okay? And I'm being deprived of that right, okay? You know why? Inglewood, the Inglewood Police Department, immediately after this law was passed, they burned all the records in public. I wonder why. Because they knew that officers had signed off on there, the prevalence of domestic violence within the police departments, PTSD, and the symptoms of PTSD manifesting in great bodily injuries to people in the public. Because the demands of the job itself, that is a hard, difficult job. And the kinds of PTSD symptoms that would arise from engaging in that process would surface at the time of arrest.
Thank you. All right, back to the committee.
I'll make the motion, but I need your help in
Okay,
terms of how to
sure.
frame it. So we're instructing the police department to provide, are we calling it a crime report?
No,
Is that the-
how about if we just start with directing the city manager and city attorney to sit down with Bay Area News Group to fashion an agreement that ensures that there is an acceptable rate of production of these top reports with subsequent case files to follow based on their discussions.
What he just said.
That,
I move.
Mr. Robinson?
You guys want to have a report back deadline for us?
Back in this committee?
Yeah.
Of course, we'd love to see you again.
I don't want our agreement on a schedule to take
I
forever.
understand. So why don't we come back first week of April? Is that realistic?
I'll include that in my motion.
Can we ask mid-April? I mean,
All
the
right,
way
second week of
negotiations
April. We'll compromise.
All right, second week of April.
Okay. All right, that's the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, we're on to item 4, which are library student success cards, SB 1025. Hello, Ann.
Hello, Mayor and Committee. Ann Grabowski, Chief of Staff and Manager of Policy and Analytics for the library. We're going to take you to an entirely different and more pleasant type of record. So as you know, the library.
It's the fun part of the meeting, Bert.
yes.
You wanna
Is
hang
it
around?
newsworthy? That's the question.
It is incredibly newsworthy. That actually, it is newsworthy that over the next probably 2 years, the library will issue close to 200,000 new library cards to our students in San Jose. We did that as an initiative, part of the Education and Digital Literacy Initiative, to ensure that our students, when they're in school, have a library card issued to them by the school, and that was made possible when the council eliminated late fees for juvenile materials. which, as a shameless plug, you will see come back as a budget request to make permanent. But in doing so, we followed in the footsteps of LA County and San Francisco, and several other peer libraries throughout the state are doing similar work. The nuance in San Jose is that we work with 21 school districts that are within our city borders. And it's a complicated process to create accounts and do the work that needs to be done to ensure that barriers are really removed. Alongside that process, we've received SB 1025 by Senator Umberg from Orange County, which mandates, actually, that schools and libraries work together in this way that we have already voluntarily done. So we're asking you today to send this bill to council for a support position is our recommendation. We're in conversation with the author's office now requesting small amendments that would make our work more efficient. But we're offering that support recommendation with the acknowledgement that this is a significant workload for us and for our peer libraries, and so there will be some changes needed in the bill to make it work for everybody. Understanding, though, that access to information for 200,000 students in our city is the most important thing.
Great, thanks, Ann. Any questions, Councilman Cummings?
Yeah, so I was reading this, and it says that you have had success dealing with 8 out of the 19 school districts. You just said 21, and I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, so we discovered we have not two new school districts, but we have schools from 2 different districts in San Jose that were not previously counted. Fremont Unified being one of them, I believe Fremont Unified being one of them, and the other being Santa Clara, as they each have schools that are technically in the city of San Jose.
I see.
And our analysis hasn't included district enrollment boundaries. So we're not talking about districts that serve San Jose students. We're talking
we have
about
21
districts with schools in the city of San Jose.
21 districts.
Yes.
Did we break a record there?
That's
think so.
incredible. It's amazing. That's amazing to me. Anyway, so let me ask you this. I tell you what, my wife is a school teacher, so I could tell you that there's sometimes a lot of direction coming down from the state, and this could be a new one. Is this gonna, let me put it to you this way. Why haven't we had agreements with the rest of the 13 school districts?
Sure, and so we have not received any negative feedback from any school district. The slow, it's not even really slow, it's a fairly fast progression, but the moderate progression that we're moving through right now, or phased approach, is really about workload for the districts based on the number of students they have, their process for rolling those cards forward, and also us phasing our own workload, because we can't issue 200,000 cards in a month. With each, actually the bill speaks to one of the efficiencies that could be created. Right now, with each new school district that we want to enter into an agreement with, we have to go to their school board with a memorandum of understanding, which is negotiated with every single school district and our city attorney's office. So it is a little bit of an arduous process. The bill, if successful, could clean some of that up. But to the underlying point of why we haven't moved forward with all districts, we're in process. It just takes a lot of time.
So has anybody done any cost estimates? And I'm just thinking out loud of what these people at the state senate level might be thinking. Is there a cost estimate on this? Is it gonna, is it gonna cost money for the school districts?
So actually, as a state mandated program, the state will be required to contribute to defray some of the costs. We're working on our estimates right now for what our full cost is for running these programs, just for our own edification. We're not sure what cost the state will ask as this bill gets to appropriations. And we don't yet have any estimates on what it costs the school districts to enter into these agreements.
One thing we've never actually done is a report back. Do we end up losing books more often now that nobody's getting fined for them? Is it like a, my biggest fear with implementing that program is people won't even care at all on returning the books or materials that they check out. Have you found that to be the case, or is there some way you can bring us back a report to see what we used to be missing at the end of the year in books, and what is, what we're missing now?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that information we're regularly collecting as part of our circulation reports and monitoring. We found that the elimination of fines and the creation of student cards has actually increased circulation, so books are leaving our collection at a lower rate. And we're working to properly match kind of the lifespan of a book and it leaving our system with one that's actually been lost or damaged. And so we can bring all of that forward in our education and digital literacy update, which is already scheduled. But the numbers that we're looking at, we're not seeing loss due to the juvenile fine-free program.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm a supporter. I just want to know if we're losing a whole lot more books or materials as a result of this, people not taking full responsibility of returning the materials. Anyway, I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation.
Second.
All right, there's no card on this item. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ann. On to item H, which is the work plan for the CED committee.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and 6 is smart cities.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, open government, Mr. Soto? Yep.
Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. I'm actually disappointed that the city is waiting to be sued before they produce those records. I mean, we already know what's in the records. There's some officers that are not worthy of that badge, you know, and that's not saying that you're against the police department to say that, but they're just not worthy of wearing it. And we as a citizenry are being exposed to them, just like a virus. You're not protecting us, the citizenry, from that virus that exists in the police department. There's paperwork that is generated that would inform the citizenry, which is a fundamental principle of any democracy. Any democracy is predicated upon the ability to have an informed citizenry. An extension of that is the Bay Area News Group. They are the ones that inform the citizenry. And then we, as decision makers, as the people that are impacted directly by your policies, then we come to these meetings and we let you know how we feel about that. And because you derive your power from the consent of the governed, which I am, I'm giving you consent and we're allowing you that power. That's what a Republican government is about. Your representatives. And so we bring it to you so that you will protect us. And I don't feel a whole lot of protection. You know, they'll come to these meetings and they'll be asking, we need more money, we need more officers, we need more of that. Hey, well, clean house, dude. Clean house. I got personal friends, personal childhood friends that are cops. They work for the sheriff's department, they work for the police department, they worked in the homicide division. I know these cops, and these are good cops. They really care about their job, they care about the integrity of the position, and they make sure that they serve and they protect, which they are sworn to do. You know, and so I'm really disappointed with the fact that you're waiting until that point, until you're sued, and then you're going to go argue these points in a court of law when the law already states that we have access to those records.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.